fantasy short stories. Of Risk and Relativity by Lesley Herron. Chapter 21, A Relative Engagement. When he was younger, after finding out that every religion was technically correct and that all that was required was enough belief, Atlas had formulated his own version of the afterlife. Big bosom barmaids, scantily clad librarians, a gaggle of incubi, fancy ladies with wings playing the harp, and a stone giantess laying in a bed of silk and goose down. If that's what awaited in Atlas's heaven, then this was surely his hell.
What happened to that scholarship of yours? Did you flunk out of school already?
You should have just joined the family business. That at least you were good at.
Where's that bear friend of yours? He was really going places. When are you gonna move back home and make a name for yourself?
He was stuck in a room filled to the brim with the entirety of his family tree. Aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, second cousins, 13 times removed, branches he didn't even know existed, all come together in one place. And they all brought their family and their friends. And as Atlas prowled through them, wearing his work uniform and holding a tray of drinks, he was reminded why he had chosen long ago to leave home.
Oh, Atlas, dear, your great-aunt Flora will be arriving soon with her family. Or are you certain this space can hold 27 more people?
Atlas set down the now-empty tray on the bar and rolled his one eye as he turned towards his mother. I told you, Ma, this room has an unlimited capacity. We'll be fine. Though I should probably warn the open bar she's coming. The Grand Echo Resort was known for their exceptional customer service. Everything from the best attendance and housekeeping to rooms that accommodated just about any need. And this room, though it hardly looked like one from the inside, was one of the hotel's finest. The Mint Ranch, as it was called, boasted some of the most powerful and complex enchantments within the hotel. It was able to grow to accommodate any size of gathering, or indeed any size of guest, from a trio of dormice to an army of rock giants. Which was good, because his family included a few of the latter on his dad's sister-in-law's side. The room was almost 3 acres now, with grassy fields and a warm, gentle breeze. It gave off the illusion that they were all outside at a generous park on a sunny day. Rolling hills of green were broken up by trees and the occasional sandpit where family members played anything from volleyball to medieval polo. Dozens of barbecues were filling the air with delicious and intoxicating scents, making Atlas's stomach rumble. His urge to visit each one was only overshadowed by his need to bolt from the room, screaming.
Oh, I'm so glad you got that ugly cast removed. Gunnar's daughter has a real knack for medicine.
Saoirse cupped a hand on her son's cheek. That's 'cause she's a practicing witch doctor, Ma. She didn't need to know that it had already fully healed and he had just been milking it.
Do try and socialize a bit, will ya?
She gave him a little pat.
They're all here to see you.
Her eyes flicked behind him.
Oh, no. Uncle Terence is trying to sell your cousin a timeshare again.
She darted past him, yelling,
Terry, what did I tell you about swindling family?
Atlas grumbled. Here to see him? More like shake their heads at him. Terry there was a minor deity. Uncle Fred was one of the best lawyers in the infernal realm. His brother was well on his way to godhood. Dad was the head money man to a mob empire. Even his great-uncle Alivard, who, let's face it, wasn't the brightest crayon in the cookie jar, ran the largest and most successful chain of onion juice companies on 3 separate worlds. With dozens of stories just like that, this reunion was practically a who's who of the multiverse, and every one of them was waiting for him to do something worthy of the family. He sighed as one of the white-haired yetis in a staff uniform refilled his tray with more flutes of champagne. At this rate, he'd never live up to their expectations. The event was only going to last 2 more days. Heck, he was more than halfway through. Just plaster on a fake smile, pretend to laugh, and do his best not to be noticed. He could do this. An already sloshed voice called across the room, "Atlas, come give your Auntie Flora a hug." Yeah, no. If he left now, maybe he could hide in the boiler rooms with the robot for the next 2 days. He squeezed between several distant cousins singing karaoke, sidled around the group of relatives listening to Cousin Serena's story about the one time with the Kelpie, and was nearly to the exit when... Atlas felt a shiver run up his spine as he recognized the cackle of his great-great-great-grandma Finley. He knew that laugh. It was the one she used when trying to get lucky. He leaned his head back and let out a long groan as he turned around. And sure enough, there she was, flashing a toothy denture smile around an elegant cigarette holder.
"Grandmama, you can't be harassing the staff."
The problem with having succubus lineage was that, even when they got older, they didn't know how to turn it off, and Grandma Finley was pure-blooded. He shot that poor soul an apologetic look, and then faltered to see she was flirting with Undine. The warrior triad waved a lazy dismissal at him and took a long pull from the bottle she held in her other hand. "Your wonderful grandmother was just telling me all about your childhood." She couldn't help the drunken smile that teased at the corner of her eyes. "And about your brief stint in underwear modeling?" Atlas sputtered.
I was 2. And aren't you supposed to be helping people with luggage or something?"
Grandma Finley let out another sharp cackle, pulling the cigarette holder from between her teeth as she shuffled around to squint up at her great-great-great-grandson.
Be nice. This young man was just helping me up the stairs, so I invited him to stay as my guest.
She patted Undine on the forearm.
You know, his Aunt Bernice still uses that picture of his tush on her line of baby wipes.
Atlas blushed, a feat only his family could achieve, and tried to change the topic.
"Grandmama, you know what the doctor said about smoking?"
Bah, I'm 213 years old. If it hasn't killed me yet, it ain't gonna do it today.
She reached out and poked at his tush.
At least you got your mother's looks, not like your toadstool of a father.
She pushed the cigarette holder back into her mouth, smiling around it before she breathed in a lungful of toxic smoke.
And her sex appeal.
She let out a bark of laughter that was again punctuated by hacking coughs.
Which she got from me.
She smiled up at the strapping young man and started to glow like a spotlight was on her. Undine swayed on the spot, a glazed expression overtaking her. It was like the sweetest scent of honey on the autumn air, and she was starving. Atlas closed his eye, praying to his realm of desire maidens for strength.
"Grandmama, please do not charm my friends."
The light vanished, and Undine shook her head, clearing away the haze with a frown.
Fine. You're no fun.
She nudged the dryad, giving them a knowing wink.
Good to know I still got it, though.
His need to get out of the room doubled. Seeing his mom charm people without realizing was bad enough, but the sight of his great-great-great-grandma doing it had him suddenly wishing for 2 eye patches. Atlas opened his mouth to excuse himself when something impacted the ground directly behind him, the force of it sending him stumbling forward. He pursed his lips and turned. A massive boulder had cratered the ground not 2 feet from where he had been standing, and he looked up to see several godly individuals clapping hands and high-fiving.
"Damn it, Byron!"
His heart hammered, But honestly, this wasn't the first time his deity-to-be sibling had flexed their might since arriving, and he may as well use the sudden outburst of applause to cover his escape. But then he spotted the dark-skinned dryad laughing and practically hanging on his brother's arm, a nearly empty champagne flute in hand.
Oh, Ciara's left tit.
He didn't have to get involved. Lucas was an adult. He could take care of himself. Atlas pinched the bridge of his nose with a long sigh as he realized the last thing he needed was for him to add to his family tree.
Ugh. Undine, keep an eye on Grandmama Finley. She gets handsy when she's had too much bourbon.
He shook his head and stomped towards the toga-wearing jocks. Byron, mid-flex, noticed his brother and waved him down.
Hey, little man. You come to congratulate me on that wicked toss?
He nodded to the boulder, extending an open palm for a righteous high five.
No!
Atlas slapped that hand.
You're destroying hotel property. The manager won't say anything to you, but she'll sure as hell take it out on me. So stop it!
He whirled around on the dryad.
And you! His voice grew dark. What are you doing here?
Lucas smiled, his cheeks a little warm from the liquor.
Well, you've been avoiding me for a few days, so I came here to find you. I've got something we need to talk about.
He put his hand up to one side of his face, stage whispering to the Arcanist.
Alone? Later? It's about the you-know-whats in the you-know-where.
Atlas's face fell into a flat expression, his mouth thinning into a line.
How many of those have you had?
He nodded to the near-empty flute. Staring down at said glass, Lucas thought long and hard, biting his tongue in an effort to recall.
At least 2.
A dumb smile formed on his face.
As in too many?
He chuckled at his own joke.
I like champagne.
Rolling his one eye at the way the dryad mispronounced the drink, Atlas reached out and snatched the man by his arm, dragging him away from his brother.
I swear, if one more person stops me on the way out, I'll...
Oh, hey, it's your mum.
Lucas stumbled a bit as he waved to someone off to his left.
Did you know she made me straight for all of, 2 minutes? I hit on your mum. It was really weird.
He shuddered as he looked their way again.
Oh, who's that she's talking to?
Atlas, despite his better judgment, turned to see the last person he would have thought to have joined this reunion. He quickly ducked to the nearest table, which just happened to be where his dad and his grandfather were seated, arguing over quarterly numbers. Baxter O'Rourke was a minuscule man who looked like a cross between a gnome and a sack of old potatoes. But if that potato gnome was also dressed in a fancy suit and large spectacles with slicked-back, thinning hair. He looked up from his hot dog as his son quickly dropped down into the bench across from him.
Oh, look who's decided to grace us with his presence.
Atlas buried his face in his hands with a groan.
Hi, Pa. Yeah. Haven't seen hide nor hair from you for 2 days, but sure. Come cozy up to us.
Baxter gestured with his beer can.
Don't think I didn't see you avoiding that ex of yours.
Another ex? At a family reunion?
Lucas's attention flickered over in the direction indicated, and once more spied Atlas's mom. Standing there, chatting with her, dressed in elegant black, flowing robes, was the most angelic figure he had ever seen. Literally, they had wings, 4 of them in fact, and several halos that encircled their head. Wavy red hair fell to their shoulders, and their piercing yellow eyes flickered in his direction. He swallowed hard when they turned to fully examine him and began to move their way.
Mate?
Lucas tapped on the Arcanist's shoulder, gently at first, then more fervently as the angelic person approached, but the Arcanist had fallen headlong into an argument with his father.
No! Look, I didn't plan on ending up here.
Baxter set down his beer and sighed.
That's not what I said. All I meant is if you ever needed a job, I could always find a place for you.
Atlas threw his hands in the air, his voice rising to match his growing frustration levels. I'm sorry I didn't end up in the business like you wanted me to. He glanced from his dad to his grandpappy. I'm sorry I'm not a literal deity like Byron. I never came home because I never wanted to come home. He pushed away from the table, his hands gripping the edge. The years of backlash had been building inside him, and he was ready to unleash it like a torrent, but was silenced when he finally looked over his shoulder. The Dryad was still tapping him, and then wished he hadn't. Atlas. He swallowed hard at the way his name fell from that angelic mouth dripping with poison. Noble. I was hoping I would run into you at some point. Noble swept their hand towards Saoirse as she approached. Your mother was kind enough to invite me, seeing as you failed to. Entranced by the radiant glow, Lucas could hardly take his gaze off the angel. What are those? He pointed at the tiny, fluttering, bird-sized objects that hovered around them. He startled, however, when one whipped around at his voice to reveal itself as nothing more than a winged eyeball. He shuddered and stumbled back a step, the gentle buzz of the sham-pagan wearing thin. These, Noble gestured to the pint-sized creatures around them, are my wards. Cherubs often look horrifying in their youth, but as they are nurtured, they will grow into more recognizable forms. Their voice was even and smooth, with a slight drawl, but Lucas couldn't help but detect a note of sinister amusement in their words. Oh! Noble turned back to the Arcanist. So... They brushed flat their amice, shooing away a cherub that was tucked beneath it and straightened out their robes. I don't see that large fella you brought with you last time. Did you break his heart, too? Atlas, who had been chasing excuse after excuse to flee from the room and the event, this realm even, was pulled from his manic thoughts and frowned at the angel's words. Who? Barry? There was a nod, and he recoiled, putting on a face of disgust. Oh, no! We were never that. He's just a friend, and... Just a friend. Noble coolly mimicked those words, a slight smile turning up the corner of their mouth. They flicked their eyes over to the dark-skinned Dryad. Any other day they might find him amusing. Male Dryads were a rarity, to be sure. But today, he was simply in the way. They lazily gestured to him. And is this another of your friends? No, he... Atlas swallowed. His attention shot between the angel and the Dryad. Okay, think fast here, buddy. If he didn't have a plausible excuse, Noble would harp on him for the next 2 days, and possibly for the rest of his life. He licked his lips with that silver tongue of his, and smiled. Friends? Oh, no. Atlas slid his arm along Lucas's shoulders, pulling him in close. No, we're not friends. This is my boyfriend. He enunciated each syllable of the word, gripping the other man's shoulder hard, hoping to get through the man's buzzed brain what he was trying to do. Lucas frowned. What? He pushed against the Arcanist, but his grip was too strong. No, I'm not. His grin grew stiff, but Atlas refused to falter, gripping the Dryad's shoulder a little harder as he said, We're not? Hoping to wordlessly convey that he very much needed to play along. A part of him, one that Lucas kept hidden and quiet, told him not to, that doing this would be an act of betrayal. But when he caught the sight of that desperate and honestly pathetic look on the Arcanist's face, he relented with a sigh and gave him a, "You're gonna owe me," raise of his eyebrows. Then he put on his widest grin as he turned in Atlas's arms, fully embracing the act with a laugh. Oh, come on, babe. You have to tell your family at some point. What? Confused, Atlas couldn't be sure if the Dryad was playing along or not. Lucas, still wearing his bright white smile, patted the man on the chest as he turned to face the gathering members of the Arcanist's family.
Well, technically, I'm not his boyfriend.
He belted out a fake laugh.
Because we're engaged.
Minutes trickled into hours, the snow-covered hillsides transforming into barren, rocky flatlands. But Eric couldn't put his mind to rest, despite how tired he felt. His attention kept flickering between the scenery whizzing by the window and down to his blackened fingers. His thoughts, however, were not on the fact that the discoloration had almost reached his wrists. No, his mind occupied itself by reliving the horrified look on his father's face as a towering god of death wrenched him off the ground by his neck. "The two of you are awfully quiet." Suspicious silence was thick in the tiny compartment, and Indigo couldn't stand it anymore. He unfolded his arms, glancing between the elf and the necromancer, but neither of them would meet his gaze, and he knew it had something to do with their flight from the city in the middle of the night, practically tripping over each other in their haste to reach the trains. The necromancer didn't even complain that he was sharing a bench seat with Duck, pretending not to hear him as he flipped idly through a book. "Okay." Indigo narrowed his eyes as he tossed an accusatory glance at the elf. "Spill it. What happened?" "What makes you think something happened?" Eric forced a smile on his face, but that, accompanied by his high-pitched tone, made his words unbelievable. He grimaced at his own failed attempt at lying. "Well, for one, the necro-dork over there has yet to say even one bad thing about Duck, or the size of our compartment." Indigo waited for Artemis to take the bait, but he was only awarded a lift of the eyebrow and a scoff. He clicked his tongue against his teeth and looked back to the elf. "Be honest, man. What's going on?" "Let's just say I met Obus, and it didn't go well." Eric leaned back in his seat, staring up at the dim, flickering light above his head. "Oh." Concern replaced the curiosity on Indigo's face. "Did he take you into the past?" "I kind of did that on my own, and he caught me." Eric held up a hand, knowing without even looking that the Selkie was about to say something. "I was just trying to set things right. One moment in time, that was it. I'm sure one small, insignificant man wouldn't alter the past as much as he claimed it would." "No one is insignificant." Eric winced at Indigo's words and moved his attention from the light to the window. "Well, it doesn't really matter now." He couldn't keep the hurt from his voice. "Obus killed my dad to set the timeline right." "That timeline?" He was unprepared for the necromancer to speak, having gone several hours with only his spiraling thoughts to keep him company, and Eric jumped at the sound of his voice. He frowned as he turned to the man, whose face was buried in a book he hadn't seen before. He leaned over to get a better view of it, squinting at the moth-eaten cover. In peeling gold leaf letters, the title read, "Mastery of the Inevitable." Eric sat back in his seat as he realized the necromancer had not left the tower empty-handed. "What do you mean?" "Rumis said timelines act like waves, collapsing in on each other, right?" Artemis paused his reading, looking up at last. "Who's to say if this is the original timeline, or whatever it became once altered? They could be trying to preserve the wrong version." He offered the half-elf a slight shrug. "No!" Indigo threw out his hands, shaking them in Eric's face. "You can't go messing around with time like that." He gestured at their cramped surroundings. "Doing that was what got us here in the first place." Eric frowned as the Selkie's words faded to white noise in the back of his mind. The necromancer had a point. Who was to say what the true course of events should be? That maybe they were already off track somehow, and he was trying to get it back. Then he remembered what Obus had said. All those lives now unlived. What was the difference between that and death. If he changed the past, even to set it right, would he be killing an entire timeline's worth of people? Or just changing the course of events? Did it matter if it meant those billions of lives would be spared? Or his brother? Did it matter if it meant saving his dad?
Engaged?
Atlas couldn't be sure who said it first, himself or his mother, when Sorsha threw her arms around him and pulled him into a bone-crushing hug. The air was squeezed from his lungs as she all but sobbed against him.
Engaged? You make your mother so happy, son,
she blubbered, pushing him out to arm's length as she peppered his face with kisses.
When is the wedding? Should I handle the invitations?
She gasped.
We could do it right now.
She grappled the dryad into her embrace and then stopped.
But what about your family, dear?
Lucas could only smile as he shook his head.
Did I hear that right?
Byron stepped forward, shooting a questioning glance at his little brother.
You're engaged?
He yanked him up off the ground and pulled him into another crushing hug, using that moment to whisper,
If you had told me, I wouldn't have hit on your fiancé, you dummy.
Yeah, why didn't you tell us sooner?
It was his father this time, still waving the half-eaten hot dog in one hand as he tried to clap his boy on the shoulder, but couldn't quite reach that high. Perhaps they didn't know how to tell people. Noble spoke as they stepped around Saoirse and approached the dryad.
Congratulations are in order. Someone fetch us more champagne.
They smiled and plucked up the man's left hand.
Curious, though.
They spoke over the surge of congratulations and cheers of celebration to point out the glaring error in their story.
You don't appear to be engaged. Where's your ring?
They turned to fire a deadly glare at the Arcanist.
Perhaps Atlas was too cheap to purchase you one. He has a history of that.
We were in elementary school, Noble.
A promise is a promise, Atlas.
Lucas chuckled, somewhat nervously at having been caught in what was clearly a lover's quarrel. He pulled his hand from the angels and offered them a smile.
There's not a ring on my finger because, well, I can't wear it while I'm cleaning.
His hand went instinctively to his chest, as it tended to whenever he felt sad or scared. He hesitated for a breath, then reached beneath his uniform and pulled out the secret he always wore. Tethered in place by an old shoelace that once belonged to a pair of Vel's work boots, a simple golden band sparkled in the light. His heart hurt seeing it, using it like this, but he forced that fake smile on his face.
I don't want to lose it.
Wide-eyed, Noble took a surprised step back. When a gaggle of inquisitive hands reached out, tugging the ring from his fingers, Lucas choked as he was yanked around to various family members, each one appraising and approving of the design, from the leaves and the emerald to the message inscribed inside the band, "For the love of my life." And all of them, and there were several dozen family members now, all gathered around them and vying for attention, wanted to know just how their awkward little cousin proposed.
Was it on the beach?
Or the Ferris wheel at midnight?
At a fancy restaurant with your mouth full of steak?
Lucas chuckled a little at that last, but shook his head.
No, it was actually a spare-the-moment thing. We were in my greenhouse, 'cause he knows I love plants, and there were all these firefly lights everywhere, and he got down on one knee, and I just said yes before he even asked.
The smile on his face, however, became progressively stiffer with each retelling of that story, until he could hardly fight back the tears. When the gaggle of aunties and siblings swarmed on Atlas instead, he took that moment to duck away from the crowd and retreated to a quieter place. Lucas had to dodge an incoming pamphlet from Tyrants, the god of timeshares, but he was able to find a sheltered hiding spot. In a room that magically catered to the reasonable whims of those inside it, He was not surprised to find a small stone bench encircled by 6-foot hedges. He slumped down on it, hoping to disappear from prying eyes, and released the torrent of pain he had been holding back for the last 20 minutes. He let it out. Everything hurt, tears streaming down his face as he struggled to catch his breath. He began hyperventilating as he clutched that ring to his chest. Similar to the box that contained his father's ashes, that little golden band and the shoelace that held it was all Lucas had left of Vel, a precious memory of a previous life. Undine had said he was alive, but could they really pick up where they'd left off? Or what if he never got out of here? If they were never reunited? It took him several long moments to realize there was a soothing hand on his back, and Lucas startled, jumping when he looked up. Saoirse was sitting next to him, offering him a motherly smile. He pawed at the mess he had made of his face with the sleeve of his uniform, fumbling over his words. Oh, sorry. Oh, I didn't mean to run off like that. It was overwhelming. We hadn't planned on an answer. Darling, I know my son. Saoirse placed her hands on either side of the Dryad's face, using her thumbs to wipe away any missed tears. He would never settle down, so that was a brave thing you did there. She pulled her hands away, holding them out a bit, asking wordlessly if she might hug him. You must miss whoever that really belongs to. Too busy fending off another wave of anguish, Lucas could only nod at her. And when Saoirse embraced him, he was enveloped in a long-forgotten memory of his mother. The way she would comfort him on stormy nights with nothing but a hug and a soft melody. The pain was too much, and he broke down right there on her shoulder, clutching her tightly as he sobbed like that scared little child he once was. Saoirse stroked the back of his head, swaying slightly as she hummed a soothing tune. After a few minutes passed, she pulled away and wiped his face the same as she had before. That's enough now. Her own vision was watery, and her voice quivered as she spoke. Crying is good for the soul, but you can't wallow in it. She moved her hands to his, gripping them. We might not be related, but you are friends with my son, and I want you to know that, in my eyes, we're family. So if you need anything, just ask. She stood, patting the Dryad on his shoulder. I'll keep him all away for a bit. Take your time, dear. He watched her go through blurry vision, hiccuping slightly as he finally calmed his breathing. Why was this hitting him so hard, Lucas thought. Was it the alcohol? No, said that bitter voice in his mind. It was being surrounded by a family, even if it wasn't his own. Was that how it really happened? Undine appeared, offering over her bottle of beer. It was half empty. With the fairy lights and the greenhouse? Lucas pushed away the drink. He'd had enough for one day, and shook his head. I'd like to think that's what he would have done. Instead, he tells me his plans for the night have changed, and he has to leave. He pulled the ring around his neck into his fingers. I was frustrated, so I yelled at him. Then we got into a stupid fight, and I never saw him again. He pulled back on the neck of his uniform, depositing the necklace beneath it. I found this among his things when I visited his mother, shortly after my dad died. He could feel the tears fighting to fall, but he was too tired to cry. He looked up, meeting his sister's gaze at last. It's hard to move on after losing something so good. I'm not used to these sort of things. Undine clapped her brother on the shoulder in what she hoped was a comforting gesture. I've never had a family before.
I never wanted one after seeing all the pain they caused. She squeezed her grip on him. But if there's one thing I do know, it's fighting. And I'll fight whatever I have to, as a promise to get you back to your cranky other half. She pulled him into a hug, and even though she was stiffer than a 2x4, Lucas smiled as he returned the embrace. They remained that way for only a few seconds before he pulled away, wiping the lingering tears that he couldn't keep from falling. What do you mean, cranky?
You have to hide me!
Atlas all but dove through the bushes, ducking behind the two dryads.
Those vultures won't leave me alone. They all want to be bridesmaids or best mans. Tyrants even wants to officiate.
He dropped his voice to a whisper as a group flocked past their hiding spot.
It's unnerving to have an actual god want to oversee your fake wedding.
He shot a glare up at Lucas.
If I'd known you were going to throw me to the wolves, I'd have let you spend a drunken night with Byron.
Well, at least your ex is looking quite salty. Lucas nodded over to the angel that sat alone on a bench, arms crossed as several cherubs fluttered about their head. They look like a bunch of mozzies fighting over who gets the first bite. He chuckled and glanced down at the Arcanist. You're welcome, by the way. For that, and finally figuring a way out of this place for all of us. I was snooping around like you told me when I discovered...
Where's my favorite grandson?
Now, there was a voice Atlas hadn't heard in a long time. Still crouching on the balls of his feet, he shuffled around in time to see a black cane knock against the hedges, and an absolutely tiny woman forced her way into their little clearing. Her eyebrows were as bushy as ever and matched the same sheen of black as the tight bun atop her head. She even wore her best jeweled eye patch.
Granny?
Grandma Sadie came to a stop before them, leaning against her cane.
Well, ain't you a sight for sore eye?
Atlas nervously moved to the side of the other two.
I thought you were off-world, running some sort of mercenary ring.
I was. Then that strumpet mother of yours tells me we're having a reunion. Been a while since I saw my favorite grandson, so I decided to check in and see how he's doing.
Well, I've been better, but...
Not you, you buffoon. Ugh, got brains like your wastrel of a father over there.
She turned and waved her cane in Baxter's direction, parting the hedges so she could yell,
I always liked your brother better.
She laughed again as the man caught sight of her, then turned back.
Nah. I'm looking for Evan.
Evan?
Atlas straightened up.
I don't have a cousin named Evan.
Sure you do. From my second marriage. Fiona and Lester's kid. About yay tall.
Sadie whacked him on the knee with her cane.
Blonde hair and a smart mouth.
Atlas stiffened, a sinking feeling settling into his gut.
Is that Sadie I hear?
Atlas grimaced as his tiny grandpa stomped his way through the bushes, followed closely by Baxter and Saoirse.
Well. If it isn't Herbert.
Sadie enunciated every letter as if it was a threat.
How's it going, Herb?
The old man narrowed his eyes at the sight of that crumpled old woman he used to call a wife, then turned to his son and yelled,
Tell that old hag to kick the bucket already!
Atlas rolled his one eye and leaned over to Lucas.
He's practically deaf, so don't mind his shouting.
How's business going, Herb? I heard you was losing money hand over fist. It's almost like someone's out there beating you at your own game.
Sadie barked a lecherous laugh as she watched her ex-husband flounder around like a drowned fish. Undine let their bickering fade against her ears as she finished the remains of her bottle. More people were starting to take note of the argument and began filtering in their direction. She did not like parties, and family reunions even less. Being head of the King's Guard had honed her senses to a sharp point, and she decided to put those to use instead of involving herself in whatever family nonsense was brewing at her shins.
She scanned over each head of Atlas's family members, taking in the wide range of species. From knee-high kobolds to towering skeletal thin figures, it was honestly a miracle and a mystery that Atlas looked human at all. She then moved her attention to the other hotel service members filtering about, serving drinks and little morsels of food, when her blood froze in her veins. There, just to the left of the Yeti bartenders, passing out canapes, she could make out a puffy black bow atop a head of blonde ringlets. You've been listening to Of Risk and Relativity by Lesley Herron, Book 5 in the series here on Tall Tale TV. If you would like to listen to the entire book in one place, or any of her other novels, you can find them at talltaletv.com/series, or by following the links in the description.
Yes, you heard me right. I manage Heavenly Vacation Properties, and I'm here to grant you a slice of paradise. Better yet, you don't have to be dead to enjoy it. 2 words: time-share.
Timeshare is 1 word, you nincompoop.
Not when you split it between 2 or more people, am I right? That's the best part. You only pay for what you use. Top dollar spots in your heaven of choice, all for a fraction of the cost. The chance of your life at a rock-bottom price. Yeah, I don't know, Terry. That sounds like a scam to me.
Yeah, you better believe it.
Would I lie to my own flesh and blood? And if you don't like it, you can always swap your investment at any time with one of our many properties. Want to bask in the glow of the northern lights? Done! Fancy a dip in the fountain of youth? Just say the word! We've got more locations than there are gods in the pantheon. What's the catch? Catch? Well, if you ask me, there is no catch, other than catching your breath after 3 weeks of eternal bliss a year. That and a small maintenance fee. Ha! I knew it! What did I say? They always get you with the maintenance fees.
Yep, too good to be true.
Come on, guys, let's go.
Better luck next time, Terry.
Guys, wait! I can give you 3 months free if you... never mind.
Terrence?
Yes, Grandmama Finley?
Would any of these timeshares happen to have, pool boys?
Well, actually...
Terry? No!